All right. Good to see you, everyone, in Arizona and Turning Point. My name's Alex Marlow. I'm the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News. And I'm the author of a couple of books. My first book was called Breaking the News. And the thesis of the book, and this might be a surprise to some of you, that the corporate media's real mission statement is not actually to inform the public, believe it or not. It's actually to advance the interests of the corporation and the regime. Let me explain with a couple of examples. Take, for example, NBC. Do you think MSNBC is really a credible news source? Of course you don't. But it's not just leftism and communism that they're pushing. They're pushing the interests of the corporate media establishment. They're part of a conglomerate, NBC, Comcast, Universal. They produce movies, they have theme parks in China, etc. How about ABC? Who owns ABC? Anyone in the audience? Disney. Yeah, a good group of people these days, right? The groomers at Disney. So they're trying to, first of all, advance the interests of the corporation, and then from there, they move on to advancing the interests of globalism, leftism, and increasingly the security state, the war industry. So that's sort of their MO. That's what they're all about. And then when they're done with that, if they have time, they'll try to report some basic facts if they get around to it. But it's not just the corporate news. It's also what we refer to at Breitbart as the masters of the universe. That's big tech, Silicon Valley, etc. Now, Breitbart was the guinea pig for censorship for a lot of these corporate entities. We were the first to be shadow banned on Twitter. And there was a moment that I want to bring up to this audience, a tearful moment at the Google headquarters that took place after Donald Trump won the 2016 election. We got this all on video. You can go to our website and check it out, where a tearful Google executive board explained how their goal was to make populism and the MAGA movement a blip or a hiccup, while crying, sniveling, saying we're going to make it a blip or a hiccup. They're going to erase our movement online. That was their goal. And they used Breitbart as the guinea pig. Our traffic at that date from Google compared to July of 2020 in the run-up to the next election went down 99.7% from Google. They weren't messing around. They're trying to destroy us. They're trying to wipe us off the internet. Top publishers get between 30 to 50% of their traffic from Google. We get less than 3%. I imagine some of my colleagues on the stage have a similar situation. They're not joking. They're trying to destroy us. But I've got good news. We're fighting back, and increasingly, if you look at the polls, it seems like we're winning. It seems like we're increasing the amount of people who are on our side. And the people in this audience are the backbone that is guiding this forward. So this panel is not just to celebrate that we're making some progress, because things are getting worse. The left is honing their blade. They're sharpening their tactics. And what they're going to try to do next is control our language. They're going to police new types of social media. They're going to boycott advertisers. And we're going to give you some insight, because we're on the front lines of it, of what they're doing, what they're going to do next, and most importantly, what you all can do to try to push back. So we have a terrific panel here. We have Emma Jo Morris, who is famous for the laptop from hell scoops, who works for me at Breitbart. We have Joshua Phillip, investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, now one of the most popular subscription news services. And Libby Emmons, who not only runs the Post Millennial, but also Human Events, so incredibly prolific and popular in her own right. So I think it's only appropriate if we start off with some of the best anecdote stories of censorship that are out there. And the person who has the best story is our own Emma Jo Morris. Emma Jo, what was it like when you were given the scoop of the century, the laptop from hell?
Thank you, Alex. I'm former New York Post. Thank you so much. Thank you. Alex poached me. So 5:30 in the morning, Eastern Time, New York City. I'm anticipating my life being turned upside down in one way or another, and I couldn't have expected what actually happened, because 5:30 in the morning, the first story in the Laptop from Hell series breaks. Bombshell email. Joe Biden met with Ukrainian energy colleague of Hunter Biden's, and I'm watching it and I'm seeing, is it just going to be picked up by right-wing media? Is legacy media going to engage in it? how do they grapple with this, you know? And I thought I had pretty good receipts, and I'm watching it, and all of a sudden I see Maggie Haberman tweeting, big splash at the New York Post. I see Jake Sherman from Politico or Axios, you know, engaging with it, and I'm thinking, oh wow, they're actually reporting news. How weird. And then about a half hour later, I see them both apologize for tweeting the story from the New York Post. And then about a half hour after that, I see people unable to tweet the link to the story at all. And then about a half hour after that, I hear people are not able to DM the story at all. And now we have hindsight. And what we learned was that obviously the CIA, the FBI was grooming social media companies to clamp down on the story and treat it in the way that they censor it, like child porn. That's from the New York Post, the oldest paper in America, founded by Alexander Hamilton. And in doing that, they gave a pass to the rest of the media to cast an aspersion on it. We don't know, is it Russian disinformation? Is it hacked? We're not sure. But whatever it is, it can't be reported, and it's wrong, and also maybe foreign interference in the election. So that's my experience with censorship, and it's been quite memorable.
The point was to keep the public unaware of the biggest scandals. I think the biggest scandal of the century was the origins of the coronavirus, which almost certainly came from a lab in China. If you said such a thing, you would get thrown off the internet. Well, the Epoch Times was saying that the whole time. Joshua, speak to this.
Yeah, so when COVID first broke out, one of the first things we were looking at was the data coming out from China. And of course, you may have seen I did a documentary within, just a couple months after the outbreak, where we investigated the origin of COVID-19. And sure enough, we said, hey, it looks like some weird stuff happened to this Wuhan lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We showed all these internal Chinese documents, a lot of public reporting, a lot of information that I think without a shadow of a doubt would be regarded as very, credible, solid, almost undeniable reporting. And of course, we showed this in our documentary. We gave all different possible angles on possible origin of it, and we showed some of the really weird experiments they were doing at that laboratory, and some of it was really weird. And of course, right after that happened, the video went crazy viral, this documentary. I think we had roughly across every single platform, if you include Facebook, like 150 million views on it.
Wow.
And they censored the heck out of it. The image of the documentary was like my face, and it had the title. They censored the image, it's literally my face, as being sexually explicit. That's what Facebook did.
That's arguable. That's arguable.
And then, of course, they had their fact checkers, going after it and so on. We've turned out the first fact checker they had actually had previously worked at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. You can't make this stuff up, right? You can't make this stuff up. And then, since then, they censored us, attacked us, they attacked me. Everything we reported has since been shown to be true. Not a single thing they said was fake. It was actually fake. It was all accurate. But this is one of the tools they use when they go after us. They initially say, hey, this is crazy conspiracy theory. Nobody look at this. They make sure nobody can see it. And then 6 months, a year down the line, it turns out we had the stories right. And by that time, it's past statute of limitations. You can't sue on it. You can't do anything about it. They're not going to uncensor you because by that time they've labeled you and attacked you as being a conspiracy theorist.
Well, the
damage is already done.
And there's by that point too, months and months later, it's way too late because people who read the initial reports that it was all a fabrication, they just still believe that. That happened with the Hunter Biden story. You had NPR coming out in 2020 saying, these are the reasons we're not going to report on this story. You saw that from multiple outlets. I think the New York Times ran a similar thing.
The intelligence agents, remember the CIA? Didn't they write their big 40-person letter saying that?
Yeah,
too?
51.
Yeah, it was
51.
And that was
more importantly than
by the Biden campaign.
More importantly than the statute of limitations to sue. I mean, sue. What are you going to sue? The statute of limitations is on action. You only get to find out that the 51 former hacks are liars after the election.
Right, and there was a big poll that came out that said some huge number would not have voted for Biden had they known that the story was accurate and real, or even known about it at all.
Yes, and this is exactly the goal, to keep the public unaware of the biggest scandals. But there's more tactics they're developing. And Libby, you and I talked about this. It's not just them blocking you completely. They're trying to change the entire way we communicate the news,
Yes.
the language we use.
Yeah, so, it's not just censorship that's the problem, but the intentional manipulation of language to redefine reality. There's been a whole new terminology foisted on us, and we all know what it is. These terms force us to ignore the cognitive dissonance in our minds. You've terms like trans woman, anti-racism, racism, social justice, victim, oppressor, mother, father, man, woman. All of these words have been completely redefined so that we can't use them to express the actual nature of reality. They've been created, manipulated with that purpose to confuse our perception. And all of these words have been basically invented by corporate media, academics, activists. Democrats have been manipulating words and definitions to change the way that we communicate. And it's not just to change the way that we communicate, but to change the way that we think. Because if we don't have the words to express the reality that we perceive, how will we be able to think about actual reality and truth? The entire point is to eradicate our perception of reality.
Okay, Libby, I'm giving you a pop quiz because you guys all know what the biggest news story is going right now. You guys are aware of what happened in the Senate? The amorous staffers who were there? Okay, so I printed out a headline from NBC News, and Libby, I want you to break this one down for us because I did see it on your Twitter feed. Senate staffer alleged by conservative outlets to have had sex in a hearing room is no longer employed. What is NBC News saying with this?
A Senate staffer who had gay sex on camera in a Senate hearing room has been fired.
Oh.
I don't know if you guys could tell from that. NBC is a real master of this. They recently put out a story about this mom who is really worried that she's going to have to move her family out of Florida because they are going to prevent her from giving her child life-saving drugs. What she means is, I can no longer sex change my child in the state of Florida, and I'm upset about that. And so I'm going to have to leave so I can go get drugs to stunt my child's growth and make them sterile for, in some other state. But that's not what NBC said about it. NBC talked about how sad it was for her and her family that, they're not going to be able to do this. But NBC was, lying.
It's life-saving.
Life-saving. Right? Life-saving. They have really manipulated that word, And if you actually dig into what they mean by life-saving, what they mean is, in order that the child, when they are a grown-up, will look like the sex they wished they were as a child, that's what they mean by life-saving. It's all about being perceived a certain way.
My favorite part of that headline is they said it was alleged by a conservative outlet, as if it wasn't all on video.
It was right there. We had a report out from Andy No today at the Post Millennial where he discovered that this is actually a pattern, a long-standing pattern of behavior.
Yeah, well, there's similar stuff going on in the White House as well, it appears. So in terms of tactics, one of the things that we've seen a lot over the last decade or so is fact-check harassment. That's a major thing. It helps keep you off of platforms like Facebook. But there's something that's evolving. It's this group called NewsGuard. NewsGuard is openly trying to separate conservative outlets in particular from advertisers to try to stifle us, keep us from growing. Emma, who are the people who are running NewsGuard?
Right, so NewsGuard is basically they call themselves a watchdog, but they're staffed with people who are from the security state, who just seamlessly transitioned into being moderators of news and editorial in America, which seems funny, and it is. You have Michael Hayden, who is he's CIA, Condoleezza Rice from the State Department, obviously, among others, who are in this kind of confab that's a pseudo-government organization that is responsible for hectoring, obviously, alternative media, conservative media, and making sure that they get suppressed online, on social media specifically, and with Google. And they just decide based on their opinion as experts, the same experts who told you that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, what's true and not, and therefore what should be visible and not. And they're basically an election interference organization, in my opinion.
They get funding from the Department of Defense, it turns out, which I think is really shocking.
Well, there's a weird ecosystem around the censorship because the federal government can't technically censor us because of the Constitution. So they found this roundabout way to do it where they finance or work with organizations that do it for them.
Yeah, that's what they've done. It was so amazing to see in the Twitter files and to understand that Biden had been, his staffers had been colluding with Twitter, that the FBI had essentially prepped Twitter executives on the laptop saying that if there, hypothetically, if there's a laptop, it's Russian disinformation. They just played the media so well.
Here's the thing is that the media wants this. That's the thing that's so sinister about it is the media wants this. And that's why independent media is more important, I think, today than ever, because the government has figured this out. Yeah, clap. That's right. Thank you. But the CNNs and the NBCs are all on the same page as the government, and they see themselves as allies in an ideological war with the right or with the populist factions of this country, not necessarily always on the right, actually. And so where traditionally media's role was always to be critical and to be antagonistic, actually, not critical, but antagonize power centers in the country. Obviously, the government is the main one. Now, they see themselves as on the same team to protect their turf, which is control over you.
But what's so great is that...
Well, I was just going to say, their turf is control over you, and they can't have any disruptions to that. So, for instance, with the Hunter Biden thing, no one called the Post to ask, how did you obtain this? No one called the Post to ask to see it. They didn't want to know because they got the order from Twitter, which naturally they know that Twitter is obviously informed by the FBI. And Twitter was working with the FBI. Twitter's lawyers were from the FBI. Jim Baker is Twitter's lawyer. All of these people are one big happy family, and it's disgusting. It's repulsive. And the point of it is to create the facade of freedom of speech, but really the government is pulling the levers at every single point where you operate.
But what I love is to see so many people who are not taking it anymore, right? I don't think this audience is particularly fooled by corporate media manipulation. And I love to see that because during COVID, so many people's eyes were opened to the fact that they weren't just lying about COVID, they were lying for a long time. And it let us really drop the scales from our eyes and see what was really going on. And it's so amazing to have so many Americans wake up and decide to think for themselves, to think critically, and really question the narrative that they're being told. I love that.
It does feel like the conservative movement is loosening the corporate stranglehold on information. Josh, your company, Epoch Times, is a huge part of this. You guys have a huge level of subscriptions. People are willing to pay for alternative content. I think almost the entirety of the speakers for these 4 days, this Turning Point event, independent media is what's represented. It's not corporate media. Josh, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, so this is my take on it. A journalist is a representative of the average person. They used to call it the fourth estate, right? You have your branches of government representing different elements of our government. The journalist is supposed to hold the government accountable. And so you're supposed to make sure they're telling the truth. You're supposed to make sure if they say they're going to do something, they're doing it. If they say money's going to go somewhere, it goes to where they're saying it's going. And if it doesn't, we expose it. Journalists are the watchdogs. We're the ones who make sure the system works how it's supposed to work. And that makes me concerned when I see them messing with that process, because to me that says they know things are not working how they're supposed to be working, and they're trying to prevent you from knowing about it, and they're attacking us for telling you about it. That's what's concerning. And so, Epoch Times, of course, and these folks here, of course, independent media standing up for not corporate interest is, I think, the simplest way to put it. But, we've been dealing with censorship, attacks, personal attacks, you name it, but that's just part of the job as far as I see it.
We don't live to protect the interests of the elite and the establishment. I think that's what keeps independent media special. It what keeps us thriving. I've been in independent media for 15 years. I can't imagine living my life any other way. We can save the country, but we need a path forward to do it. Libby, give me your steps. What are we doing over the next several years to try to continue to grow this ecosystem?
Well, I think that it's really incumbent on Americans to be aware of what the narratives are and to push back against them, to not use the language that is being forced on you, to constantly be questioning these new definitions. I think that the power lies with the American people to stand up and fight for this country. It's not their country, it's our country. It's ours. And so long as we don't capitulate to these ridiculous demands, so long as we don't shut off our minds, so long as we don't say, reality is what you tell me it is, and I'm going to, go along with that, then I think that we have a path to victory and a path to saving this country from the people who would destroy reality, and, take away our rights entirely.
Well, that's sadly all the time we have. Thanks to Charlie and Turning Point USA, but most importantly, thanks to all of you who read our content, listen to our shows. We couldn't do it without having an audience of tens of millions, and we all want to grow. So check us out online, and thank you.
Thank you.